Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending this Q&A webinar, our follow-on webinar about the Procurement Act. So we're going to go through a few different things and pick up on the sorts of things that you guys have been asking about since it's gone live and the fun month that we've had since, and we'll see if we can add some value and answer some of the pending questions that people have either fired in or that they're going to during the course of the webinar. Chat function, question function, everything should be open, everything should be working. So do ask some questions or fire some comments in the chat, and we'll try and get to those as we're going through the webinar across the next sort of 45 minutes to an hour. So strap yourselves in, guys. It's a beautiful sunny Wednesday lunch time, certainly in Aberdeen. If it's sunny here, it's probably sunny everywhere. So we'll get going. I should say my name's Andrew Watson. I'm the bid training and consultancy manager here at Proactis. So doing everything relating to helping our clients be as successful as possible when they are putting in bids, formal proposals, primarily into the public sector. So making sure they're as successful as they possibly can be on each and every occasion. And I'm joined with by my esteemed, lovely colleague, Alistair. Hello.
Hello, hi everybody. I'm Alistair O'Donnell, the bid manager in Andrew's training and consultancy team. I deal with the consultancy requests, so we can do bid writing, bid review services, ad hoc compliance reviews, or just a chat about any
We
upcoming
do like a
tenders.
chat, Alistair. We
We do
do like a chat.
a natter, yeah.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Shall we continue? Alistair, take it away. Set the scene for us.
Yes, so Q&A on the Procurement Act. It's a follow-on, a pairing to last month's webinar on the Procurement Act. This slide is a carbon copy. I just wanted to keep it in just to breed a bit of familiarity through repetition, just to keep us focused on the context of the Act and what it seeks to do, and just to give a bit of backdrop to what we're going to talk about over the next hour. So the Procurement Act, my analysis of it is that it seeks to raise standards throughout the industry and facilitate SME involvement in simpler, more flexible and accessible UK public sector procurement exercises. So if we just keep this mission statement in the forefronts of our mind, it should give a little context to what we're talking about.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So we'll run through our agenda. Like I did say before, guys, if you do want to punch anything into the chat function should now be activated, working. I'm wrestling with the tech as we speak, and obviously there's the question function as well. We're gonna dive in and try and do some even more technologically marvelous things as the webinar goes on. So we'll see how that goes. Okay, so in terms of the agenda, a little bit of an introduction, which will also kind of serve as a little bit of a recap of the Procurement Act and some of the stuff we've talked about previous. Guys, this is a Q&A, so it's not supposed to be exhaustive. We're picking up on particular things that people have flagged as being issues. What I would say is we've done not one, but two prior webinars relating to the Procurement Act before it went live. Go onto the Tenders Direct website, go into our Knowledge Hub and look for those two webinars, which are a bit more exhaustive and a bit more comprehensive in terms of coverage. So do have a look for those, and you can go through them at your leisure. This one, the recording will be made where available as well, and you can go through the recording at your leisure in the coming days. What we're going to spend some a little bit of time on is talking about what are the preliminary observations that we've found. That's from the interactions with our clients, and also more specifically from the sort of broader team here at Proactis Tenders Direct, and in terms of what insights we've got from looking at processing, evaluating all of the different tenders that are coming out across the UK and Europe public sector marketplace. So got some findings to talk through. We will talk about some recommendations moving forward. We're live under the new guise of the Procurement Act for just over a month now. What are our recommendations based on what we've seen that you should be doing in the coming weeks, months, and years? We'll spend a bit of time going over some of the questions that you guys asked as part of the registration process for the webinar, and there were some particular questions that were asked in slightly different ways, lots and lots of times. So we're going to spend some time focusing on those. And then at the end, time permitting, of course, we're going to dive in and answer some live Q&A questions. And if you do ask any hard ones, then I'm going to get Alistair to answer them. Okay, guys. So feel free to be as technical and tricky as possible. So I'm only joking. Okay, or am I? So, in terms of an introduction, just a little bit more. Let me spin onto this slide a little bit more. Before we get going, I wonder, is this going to work? I'm going to try something. Let's try it. Let's try and should we try and do a cheeky poll? Let's try and do a cheeky poll. I'm going to launch it. Let's do it, guys. Have you noticed much of a difference in tendering since the Procurement Act came in? Let's launch the poll, guys. We're only going to do 30 seconds on this, and then we are going to share the results, and then we are going to move on. But it's just cool. I like doing polls. It's nice, and hopefully it'll give you an idea as to what your peers are thinking at the same time. Okay, that is most. Wow, guys, use your fastest fingers. Most people have now voted, and actually, the biggest answer is no, which is really interesting. Let me end and share results so that we can move on. So, hopefully, that should be clear. The biggest answer, 58% of you are saying no. Have you looked at any tenders in the last month, folks? Have you? Yes, but mainly just registering on the CPD, 29%, and yes, lots of changes, only 13%. Excellent. We're getting the emojis going as well, guys. Excellent. Okay, let me close it down. But maybe it just goes to show some of this stuff that we did feel, the CPD part aside, some of this will feel a little bit of a slow burner to kind of percolate through to you. I'm mixing my metaphors, but you know what I mean. Let's close it down and go back to the slides. So that's cool. It's been live. So broadly, the fact that people haven't seen lots and lots of change, and that was we're over a month live, indicates that broadly we have all survived. Oh, it's not ended anything. Things are still working. I want to spend a little bit of time just now, folks, just talking about the central digital platform, which I think is fair to say has broadly worked as well. It really has worked. Let's be fair. The reason I want to talk about it is that there was a huge raft. I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds of folk on the webinar, and so obviously it's a topic of interest to folk. But there were dozens and dozens of questions relating to the central digital platform, what it's for and what its use. So again, this is covered more comprehensively in our previous webinar, the last one that we did in the last procurement one, which we did in February, just last month. Whistle stop of the central digital platform, folks, because there were so many questions asked about it. Central digital platform, to bid for a tender that's been released post the Procurement Act going live, 24th Feb, you have to have registered as a supplier on the central digital platform, this government platform. You have to register and you have to upload, sorry, say that again, you don't have to upload, you have to complete information. I call it the headline information about your organization, the organization's name, address, some things relating to certifications or accreditations, confirming about audited accounts, persons of significant control, that type of stuff. It's the headline information that you will recognize from the part of the standard selection questionnaire which you'll be used to completing. It is not, and as far as we know, never will be, the place where you will go to complete a full tender submission. It's not even a complete SQ. It's only that very specific top level headline information that you complete there. When you complete it, you can get a unique identifier code, which is called a PPOD, a Public Procurement Organization Number, which will act as a unique identifier for your organization as you move through the system so that you can be tracked and it's clear on who's applying for what opportunity. For each tendering opportunity, there will be a different procurement platform that is being used, not the central digital platform, a different procurement platform that is being used for that given procurement. You will have to, as part of completing that response, you will have to put your PPON number into that response, and you will have to have a method of pulling the information that's held on the central digital platform about you that you've completed, pulling it into the platform which your procurement opportunity is being run through. There are two methods that are currently being used to pull the information from the central digital platform into the platform that is hosting the procurement that you are responding to, the actual tender opportunity itself. Method number one, there is an option to download the information that's held about you on the central digital platform, i.e. the information you've completed, and then upload it as an attachment into the procurement portal that's being used to host that opportunity. The other slightly more sophisticated way is within your profile, there is access to a share code, which is distinct from your peapon. A share code which you put into the portal that's hosting the procurement opportunity, and it allows that portal to directly call the information via API through into that portal, so you don't have to do an upload and a download of a file. So you will see both methods in use dependent on which procurement portal you're going to be using. Hopefully that's all clear. The instructions for any given tender should make that clear as well. But if you're applying for anything post 24th of Feb, you do have to go and complete this information on the Central Digital Platform. I know we've covered this in previous. There were so many questions about it on the registration. I did want to cover it, so hopefully that's clear. The other things, just in terms of what we're seeing and things to notice about before I go any further, who'd like another poll? Me! Is your organization registered on the Central Digital Platform? Guys, fastest finger first. Are we registered? How prepared are our wonderful audience for this webinar? Okay, wow. Our eye is in. We're really fast. Okay, so we're just over a month down, and in terms of people that are actively interested in this, I'll stop it there. That's way over, well over 2/3 of people have voted in there and sharing results. 71% of you are registered on the Central Digital Platform. Big thumbs up. What do you reckon, Alistair? Thumbs up for the guys who've done that. Excellent.
Yeah,
When
that's good to know. Yeah.
it's a high percentage, so really pleased, guys, that's kind of going and that's working smoothly for you. 21% no, and a few don't know what it is. So, guys, if you're new to this, you can go and there is government, help information out there. If you type in Central Digital Platform, it will talk you through that registration process. So, just to share the results, 21% said no, 71% said yes, and 8% say, I don't know what this is. If you don't know what it is, if you're in that 8%, well done for being honest and saying, but do go and do your research. You will need to get that sorted, along with the 21% that said no. You will need to get registered, get all that working, get your PEEP on before you can bid for anything in this new world post-Procurement Act. Okay. So, and just other things that we need to be thinking about. We are seeing the new notice types, new terminology flowing through. So just do be aware of that. And again, you can search. There's obviously guidance in terms of what these things are. Any standalone procurement activity should make sense in its own right. But if you're not clear on any of the terminology or what it means, certainly our previous webinars and our Knowledge Hub on Tenders Direct is a really good place for some no-nonsense kind of review of terminology or explanation. And obviously there's government resources out there as well. So hopefully, based on what people are saying, it doesn't really feel that different, and we can just get on with things. But there are some things that we do need to be aware of as part of that. Okay, folks, thank you very much for the participation in the webinar. Always really good fun. Keeps things a bit interesting. So in terms of what we've gathered as an organisation here, I've rambled on plenty. Alistair, what are some of the preliminary observations that have come out across sort of Tenders Direct practice? Where are we at with this?
Yeah, so thanks, Andrew. We've got a really good insight into these by virtue of our product and our review team within part of Tenders Direct. So I want to give you a little backdrop to our product. This isn't a sales pitch at all, but it's just going to lend some credibility to the insights that our review team have provided us. So Tenders Direct is a tender alert service. We find every single opportunity that has been published, and then we bundle these up and we send them on to our customers and our clients based on your search parameters, search words, regions, values of opportunity that you're looking to pursue. Now, a little step that we do in the middle is we have a human moderating team, our review team, and what they do is they check for any little ambiguities, inaccuracies, any little mistakes. They tidy these up and then they send them on to you. They also crucially use the English language rather than CPV codes. Now, the example that was given to me when I started is, with ambiguities in language, is tablet and tablet. So, can a computer, can an AI system discern the difference between an iPad or a pill? What are you trying to procure, tablet or tablet? In Scotland,
Or sweeties, yeah? or suite.
Yeah,
Is that what you're going to say
well,
as well?
tablet, or tablet, yeah, north of the border. So that's the type of detail that our teams are picking up on, rectifying, and then again just tidying up before we send these on to you. So not a sales pitch, but the point of what I'm saying is that our review team read everything, every tender there was, every tender that there will be. So their insights, they've given us some really, really good insights in the first month post implementation. So we'll talk through these if we hop on to the next slide, please. Good. So notice volumes published under the Act. So the review team, they've given us some insights. It's what we expected. Andrew and I spoke about this prior to implementation, was people like what they're used to. So before the regulations changed, there was a massive surge, big flurry of activity as notices were published. And then once the new regulations have come in, there's been a little bit of a slower spinning up of adoption. So since the month has passed, FTS notices we've found have stabilized. They've come back to expected volumes. A point to note though that below threshold notices remain slightly below average, and there are fewer tenders on average from Wales and Scotland on these platforms. Again, these will stabilize. Tenders are out there. The work hasn't dried up. There was just a massive surge before the Act came in, and then there's been a little bit of caution just in the month since then. So these numbers will stabilize, but for now, they've stabilized from the STS perspective. Below threshold and devolved authorities are just yet to pick the pace up there. So good information to have. And again, plenty time for these to stabilize into the future. If we move on, another insight is to do with the adoption of new notice types. Now, this is a bit of a non-negotiable. It's something that does need to happen, but it's good to see that the system works. As Andrew said, we've all survived, and we are seeing lots of planning notices at this stage, which is normal and very expected because this is the stage of the process that most procurements will be in. So I imagine as the procurement journey moves on, we will see the next suite of notice types in that sort of chronological order. And roughly we're seeing about 6 notices per day. And again, that's directly from our review team who do read everything. And we'll pop on to the last one. This is quite a biggie, and this is really good to know, is there have been some buyer errors from authorities. So it's just to pass this information on to yourselves and just make sure that you do know that we are still spinning up. Everybody, suppliers and buyers, are still coming to grips with the new Act, with the new system. There's new software. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot of upskilling to do, and some errors, inaccuracies are slipping in the net. So just be aware of that fact. Now, these are coming in the form of duplicates. We're seeing quite a lot of duplicated information, instances where they haven't deleted an older version of a notice, and so multiple have been published. Again, many contracting authorities are still getting to grips with the new system, so the same tender may be, published on multiple times. We're also seeing more modification notices than we were before, which again would indicate more mistakes, but mistakes that are being caught and corrected. And there was a piece that was sent to us, a pretty good example, is some buyers aren't always selecting the correct region of the works. So they're selecting the region that they're based in rather than the region that the work will be carried out in. So the example given to us was a southeast contractor put the region as southeast, but the work was actually being carried out in Scotland. So this is good information for you guys to know. Expect in the very short term these little mistakes, inaccuracies, and maybe just use slightly more robust search parameters, maybe widen the net of the regions that you're looking at, maybe widen the language that you're using to search things, and just expect the unexpected, just while people, buyers particularly, get to grips with the new system. So maybe just don't take it on face value that it's going to be perfect, and just maybe carry out slightly more robust searches just to make sure that you're not missing out on opportunities. Within this, Andrew's going to talk a little bit later about the clarifications log, but use this. Use this to speak to the buyer, ask questions. You're entitled to answers. So again, maybe an upskilling piece to be done here. If you're not familiar or fully comfortable with how to use the Q&A log, and you'll talk you through it, that would be a good place to start. That'll be well worth the time that you spend upskilling onto that. So if we move forward again, please, Andrew, we do have just some
Alistair,
recommendations.
just before you dive into, there were a few questions that came in that are kind of relevant to some of the stuff that we've been talking about. So I just wondered if we could just jump on those quickly. I know I'm dicing about with the order. Just a couple that I thought were quite interesting just to pick up on it, so people can kind of keep firing them in as we go through, if that's okay. So one of the questions was relating to the CDP and the bit I talked through. So are there share codes for each opportunity, or is it a fixed code for all tender submissions? So the code that you get that you can then put into the portal that's running the procurement, to then basically call for the API call, that will stay the same until you change any of the details within the CDP, against your profile, so against your organization. Once you change any of the details, it generates a new code, and you need to put that new code in. So you can check it each time, but basically it will stay the same until you make any actual changes within the CDP against your company profile. Okay. So it's a good question. So one person has said, just to back up what our team had found, basically they're saying there's no tenders left. Where have all the tenders gone since 24th of Feb? Which we are seeing. The thing about that, just to reassure people, is obviously that like the the the, the volume of activity, the need, the requirement for public sector organizations to procure stuff really isn't impacted by the act itself. It's just the way in which they go about the procurements that's been impacted. But the need for them to buy stuff because they need to buy stuff um, has is still the same. Okay, so just to let you know. Sorry, Alistair, I'll have a quick look through more of the questions, and you carry on. I'll stop interrupting.
Fine, no, not at all. Please do. It's a Q&A webinar. I'll give you an example of the CDP question, the first one that you answered there. I worked with a client last week who were bidding for something. It's a DPS, which is under the new regulations. So we did his CDP, and he did it all correct. Everything was fine. Got the share code, got the zip file that you can download depending on what portal you're using. And then this was in a care setting. So we decided that we wanted to add our or his CQC registration, the Care Quality Commission registration. So that changed the information on the CDP. So we updated it, put in the registration code, accept, and then the share code changed. The PPON didn't, because it's the same company, that won't change, but the share code changed. Now, if we were to go in 6 months and update their ISO qualification, that would change the share code, and it would also change the information within the zip file. So just if that gives a little bit of concept to what will change the share code and what won't. It's when this information changes, as Andrew has mentioned. So yes, we will talk about our recommendations then, if you want to skip on to the next slide. And again, I think this ties in nicely with the question that we got, where's all the work gone? It's coming back. We are seeing a bit more stability coming to tender volumes. So certainly my advice would be, this is probably the sort of time, if you have moved or removed any resource away from tender identification, maybe consider reallocating that now. If you're a small business owner, SME owner, and you do this yourself, maybe take your checks back to every couple of days, even daily, and just refocus your company resource into this area, because we are seeing these tenders coming back. I think what's happened is this big flurry before the implementation date has caused a bit of a choke point, and now we're experiencing a bit of a drought. So I think if nothing else, if that gives you some comfort that you're not missing things, there is a drought, but we can expect normal volumes probably from from now on. Okay, and then second piece of advice, there is no going back. These are the regulations that we're using. This is the act that we're going to be governed under. So it would be worthwhile upskilling and developing your teams to become comfortable with using and understanding these new provisions. We're not going to go back to the old regulations. They will be phased out as opportunities using them finish, and then everything's going to be under the new Procurement Act. So it's worth upskilling, developing yourself and your teams, and getting yourself to a position where you can use it quite comfortably. Secondly, if we want to drive on, thank you. Yeah, conduct your own due diligence on notices. Again, this is just a point that it's just factual. We are experiencing some slight buyer inaccuracies. Now, the tenders direct team, the review team, they will fix these for you. They will make slight amendments, slight adjustments. They'll put the right region in. They'll maybe use clearer language so that it can align with your search parameters. If you're not a tenders direct member, if you're doing this manually, if you're doing this using tender alerts directly from the portals, just be aware that we have identified some of these inaccuracies, and it might just be a case of having a daily look over the portals using keywords rather than CPV codes. CPV codes do have a bit of a weakness that if they're mischaracterized at the start, that will cascade throughout the life cycle of the notice. And if you don't have alerts set up to that CPV code, you may miss out. So search with language and keywords. You may also want to temporarily widen your geographical search parameters just until buyers have ironed out some wrinkles. Now, I've got a note here. A lot of this is working. A lot of this is working really well. There are just some slight issues. So by and large, don't panic and don't worry that something's going to get by you, that you're going to run out of work, that the system doesn't work, that we can't bid. What I would say though is if you're relying on a singular contract, perhaps renewing a contract that you're currently delivering, and you maybe do have all your eggs in one or two baskets, I'd be using all the tools in your locker to make sure that you've got visibility over it. So scrutinize pipeline notices. Speak to buyers directly when you're allowed. You're not allowed when it's been published, but you can speak to buyers out with that time. Get in contact with them, find out what's in the pipeline, get information on expected timeframes, understand which portal the opportunity is likely to be coming through, check daily, and also, as we've said, expect some minor mistakes in the short term and just insulate your identification process against that would be my advice. So I'll hand over to Andrew, who is going to talk a little bit about the clarification questions. So over to you.
Thanks, Alistair. Just loads of questions coming in. There's loads of questions specifically about, or loads of some comments as well specifically about the share code and what you can and can't do within CDP to trigger that to change. But guys, what I would say is a really sort of simple way to make sure you're never getting caught out with this is you make sure that when you're going into a tender opportunity, you go into your CDP, go into your profile, um, make sure it's up to date, and then when it's up to date, then take your share code from it then, so you know that that one has got the most up to date one, rather than saying, okay, well the share code shouldn't have changed, so I'll just put it in. Go in and if you want to go in and check it to make sure it's the same for the new tender opportunity that you get out. It's going to take you 2 minutes to do it, and it gives you that peace of mind to make sure that it's not changed when you've added in any details or put anything that you thought shouldn't trigger a material change. So there are lots of questions to that. Just to make sure, if you want to do it that way, it would help. There's a couple of points or questions around about the level of accreditation required to participate in public sector opportunities, and it seems to have increased as a result of the Procurement Act. So it shouldn't. So in essence, it won't have done. It might look like it, but when you're asked about the levels, you're asked if there's specific like certifications that you have to have regarding, putting that into the central digital platform. If it's asking you about accreditations, you have to record those. But in terms of the actual standard that's required, like is ISO certification relevant for a given opportunity, that will still be considered on a case by case basis for that organization. So based on, is it relevant for the nature of the, I'm using ISO as an example, and obviously there's lots of different ISOs. Is it relevant for the nature of the work? Is it proportional to the scale of the opportunity? So what we shouldn't see is this big uplift in terms of a accreditation or a certification burden that's being placed that's going to create barriers for SME for participation. That's not what the Act was designed to do. That's the opposite. If you remember back to Alistair's sort of scene setting slide, it's the opposite of what they're supposed to do. So it should have the opposite effect. That should not be what's happening as a result of the Procurement Act. It might just be that in a couple of tenders you've looked at, they do seem to have a little bit of a higher accreditation burden or certification burden requested of you, but that's against the general direction of travel that the Act is supposed to bring in. Okay, so just to draw attention to that, and hopefully I can put some mind at ease. Another question that came in, just thought I could dwell on for a second, was I've seen a dramatic increase in DPS tenders recently rather than specific framework opportunities with a limited number of companies awarded to the framework. Is this result of the new Act? Will DPS replace frameworks? No, they won't. And actually, DPS themselves are being superseded by dynamic markets, which have a broader application. And again, we went into more detail on that actually in our Feb webinar on the Procurement Act, so you can look at that one for a bit more detail. But the idea is there will still be a place for DPS or in their new closed dynamic markets. There's going to be frameworks, and there's actually going to be open frameworks which allow new participants to be added, and or failing participants to be removed from frameworks during their term. And again, we talked about that in the previous webinar. So no, DPSs are not designed to be replacing frameworks. And it's again case by case what's appropriate, what shift is appropriate, whether or not there'll be a slight shift towards dynamic markets versus more frameworks happening. I'll talk a little bit more about that later when we talk about what we're going to do in the coming months as well. Okay, great stuff, guys. Keep the questions coming in. There are loads of them, so we're not going to get through them all, but just to pick up on some of those live ones. Okay, clarification. So within this new world, we're saying that there might well be some things that we don't understand. There might well be some issues arising with, the contracting authorities potentially making mistakes. Our clarification question functionality within any opportunity is our starting point for trying to confirm if there are mistakes, to seek clarifications on any ambiguities, and to make sure we're totally clear on what's required of us to submit a compliant tender. So if you're there, I should have done a poll question on this. If you're regularly responding to tenders, this is pre and post Procurement Act. If you're regularly responding to tenders and you're very infrequently asking clarification questions, then I would argue you're probably not fully clearing everything in your own mind. Normally there are things that are unclear. Almost every tendering opportunity that I work on, you can find reason to ask a clarification question. That's not, I don't just mean something that's pointless or just asking for the sake of it. I mean actually something that will make a difficult, a potential material difference to how you put response together. There's a question about this is what I shouldn't have touched, Alistair. We need to go and look this up. Is there a legal question for a clarification window to be included under the new Procurement Act? I think that the regulations around the requirements for a clarification window are still valid, are still there, and would carry on into the new Act. But in terms of which piece of the legislation explicitly refers to it, I don't have it to hand. But you shouldn't see a formal procurement exercise under the new Procurement Act if it's at that threshold level in terms of the value. It's not like a quick quote or anything, and it's being run through a procurement portal. There should be a clarification window included within that tendering opportunity, and it should be clear on when it starts, when it finishes, with a reasonable amount of time. So there should definitely be that should definitely always be the case for a formal procurement but I just don't have the bit of the legislation to quote from. Would you agree, Alistair? Have I misrepresented? Am I going to get sued?
No, no, I think that's right. Yeah, I haven't noticed any changes. The
Yep.
clarifications log will typically close up to a week before the deadline. So it's important to be aware that the clarifications deadline will be different from the tender deadline. And then similarly, conversely, any deadline extension should also include a commensurate extension to the clarifications log. So I haven't been aware of any fundamental changes to that under the new regs, no. And I'll do a research piece on where that's contained.
Excellent. Okay. So, great question, obviously relevant to what we were talking about there. The other bit about our understanding and making sure we're ready for the brave new world and we understand what's happening and we don't have ambiguities is to think about our internal process. How are we running this as an organization? So we want to take the time and the effort at the start of any procurement that we're going to pursue, any tender we're going to pursue. We need to make sure we're really clear on what the process is being used that we have to respond to. What are our obligations to put together a compliant response within that? So are we really clear on the process? Remember, we've got these new flexible procedures, so you might see some funky combinations of bits and pieces that authorities are going to do. They might have some negotiations, multiple rounds about things. So you need to see what you need to see what it is that they're looking or how they're going to run their procurement and make sure you really understand that. Part of doing that and part of having that communicated properly throughout your organization, we always recommend for any opportunity that you are going to pursue to create call it what you want, like a one page or a tender brief summary on a page, so that you've got that clarity and include within that what's the tender process being used and what's the evaluation process being used within that. So include that headline information, so when you're discussing it within and around the organization, everyone is clear on what is it that we're actually responding to here, guys. How do we actually do that? And what you can do as well is you can ask, without preempting it, you can ask a colleague to review the tender documentation independently of yourself, and ask them what their understanding of the process and what their understanding of your obligations as a supplier are. Did they come to the exact same conclusions as you, or did they come to different conclusions? We have fun doing this, Alistair, when we're working with clients, right?
Oh, the old compliance matrix. Yeah, that's 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 a fun morning.
So we do encounter it where really there are ambiguities. So sometimes Alistair to me, or vice versa, will say, "Look, can you look through this and what's your understanding of the process here?" And nine times out of 10, we've come to the same conclusion, but we might say, "I think it's this, but actually it's not 100% clear exactly how they're running this, exactly how they want this to work." So the kind of query or the question is worth asking, and that's what your clarification questions are for. So hopefully that makes sense. A little bit of a way to kind of guard yourself and so on against this. I think we're in reasonably good shape. With time wise, we've answered some questions. Some of the registration questions that came in were they were in one form or another, quite a few versions of them. So we'll spin through those, and then I have been ticking off quite a lot. I've been trying to look at the clusters around the live questions as well, but I've been ticking off some of those as we go. But do keep them coming in as well. So there was a question around, can you explain what information will be published if a company is unsuccessful in a tender? So when you're applying for something, if you don't win, what is published? And I took it slightly more broadly as a question. So anything that is above threshold, you will get an assessment summary for. So this is basically saying this isn't published into the wider world, but it will be returned to you, which will give you that understanding of what were my scores and the reason behind those scores. So kind of broken down a little bit of detail to understand around your commercials and around the quality. And also you will get within that assessment summary, it will tell you what the winning scores were and the reasons why they scored. The change is it's not a direct comparison. They're not saying, well, they did this better than you, and for this question, it was the same for this one. They did this better than you for that one. So it's not a direct comparison. It's saying, this is why this scored here. this is why it's scored there, and it's for you to sort of take away and make that inference and understand with your own scores. If you weren't successful, why were you not successful? My old sort of soapbox stuff I always go on about, that Alistair's heard 100 times, is about, was it to do with the quality of your solution, or was it to do with the quality of the message regarding your solution? So where was the issues that you had? Where did you leave marks on the table? Is it that your offering isn't good enough, or are you not good enough at communicating that offering, or is it a combination of both? It's not the topic for today, but that's the way we should be thinking about it. The other part to that I was going to say is there will be a contract award notice, which is the published part that goes into the public domain. Very confusingly, I'm not quite sure why we've chosen to do it this way, why the authorities have chosen to do it, the powers that be have decided that there's now a new notice type called a contract award notice, which is different from what a contract award notice used to be. And a contract award notice, as it was previous, is now contract details notice. Did everyone follow that? No. So a contract award notice is the notice that will trigger the standstill event, so that when it's saying who's actually going to be awarded the work, okay? So that will show the winners, the contract value, etc., on it. And relating back to the question, if the contract value is over 5 million, 5 million or over, it will also list the unsuccessful bidders, so who bid and was not successful as well, okay? And then after that, after the standstill period has happened and taken place, you will get a contract details notice, which is published within 30 days of the contract being entered into, which will include the details of the contract. And for ones over 5 million, $5 million, it will actually have redacted versions of the contract and what the agreed KPIs are. So lots of transparency around that for the bigger value ones. Okay. So that was a registration question. There are lots and lots of versions of that. Alistair, save me. How to answer tender requirements, especially around social value. Can you spin through this again? You know, people are talking about social value, the importance, a little bit of a kind of movement from one area to another, different focus post Procurement Act. Can you tie this together for us, relating to how we go about answering requirements, specific social value?
Yes, yeah, I think great question. Very relevant as well under the new landscape that we find ourselves in. We see the move from most economically advantageous tender over to the most advantageous tender. So we're seeing buyers taking a wider consideration of societal elements and added value that we can bring over and above the goods and services being procured. So what I thought I would do is this question tied in really nicely with something that I'm working on right now. And I'm working with a client for a bid. I won't go into any more detail than that, but this is the question. We've got a social value question, and the client in this case has requested that the social value question be answered with the bullets on the screen. So I've had a good think about this, a good look at it, and I think that this really represents the gold standard of information that you can provide within a social value response. Obviously, it's about the initiatives, the measures, the values of what you're doing. I think we could also go further and include a little bit of location or buyer specific research. I think I've said a couple of times before that social value in Glasgow will look very different to social value in Buckinghamshire because there are different socio-economic factors at play in these areas. You could do worse than to have a look at indices of multiple deprivation and just see what the issues are in an area and then mold your social value deliverables around those, make them personalised and bespoke. So this question has asked for timescales for delivery, the resources that you will use to plan and deliver, the activities that you will undertake, including stakeholder engagement. Stakeholder in this case is the authority, beneficiaries, any voluntary, charitable or social enterprise recipients or stakeholders, confirmation that the planned activities are forward-looking activities which are specifically related to this contract. So that is a really, really important piece within social value. The initiatives that you're delivering need to be newly arising and as a direct result of this opportunity. So if you sponsor a kids grassroots football club strips, if you do that anyway, then you can't just apply that to your social value response. If you sponsor them for an additional sum, then you can include the additional sum. So it needs to be newly arising as a direct result of winning the work. It can't be something that you're doing anyway. And that's crucial, because if you say something that this is what we did last year, we'll do it again, no, you won't receive any marks for that. So newly arising and as a direct result of winning this work. And then how you will monitor and report on the delivery of social value requirements and address any performance issues. So if you go through this list and if you respond to each of these things with a credible and thoughtful response, you'll score very highly. It becomes real. Rather than we'll cut a check to the local food bank, it's no, Andrew, our social value champion, will cut a check for £150 to the local food bank on on the high street who we have identified. Andrew is our social value champion, and Andrew will be handling all deliverables, all accountability and responsibility for this, and this will be done by April. In May, Andrew will report, he will reach out to the food bank, he'll monitor the deliverables, and he'll report back on this. Any issues found within this will be actioned by Andrew and conveyed to the local authority, the council, the NHS. It needs to become real. It needs the guts rather than just, yeah, this is what we'll do. No, prove it. Make me believe you. So I think the items on this list will keep you, it will steer you into how to make this a pretty credible response. Um, I think as well, we've spoken about this a couple of times before. I really need to drill into the messaging of what we're talking about, the credibility of our statements, and especially with social value. I think it's a much stronger look for companies to have a pre-established, credible approach to this, rather than your response being perhaps reactive to the social value requirements of the opportunity. Now, larger companies will typically have an ESG, environmental, social, and governance policy, which cover this area, generally driven at senior management or director level. Now, there's no reason that SMEs can't adopt a slimmed down version of this, something bubbling away in the background that shows these initiatives are an extension of our pre-existing considerations rather than, oh, this is new to us. You don't want to convey that look. Again, accountability and responsibility for delivery is crucial. I've heard it described as just one throat to choke, which I think is a good way to think about it. But buyers
Charming,
want to know.
absolutely charming, Alistair.
They want to know who they're dealing with. They don't want to be passed around emails. Oh, that's Andrew who deals with it. No, no, no. I asked Alistair to do it this time. No, no, no. Louise is handling this. They want to know who has overall accountability within your business so that they can reach out to you and have succinct, streamlined communications and get to the bottom of it. Okay. So, in that vein, maybe you'd like to have a social value champion who is your accountable person. Now, if you don't, maybe you could start in today. Um, Again, though, it needs to be more than a symbolic nomination. This is a person in your company who will arrange delivery of these measures and handle the monitoring and reporting requirements as we've seen. So again, there's really a lot of ways to answer this question, but what you see on the screen is a really good approach to take just to stay credible and believable.
And that's kind of Procurement Act proofed, if you like. That's one of the points, right? In terms of like what they're expecting, the expectations around social value, broader societal good. That's the way to think about your response to meet all those bits, which is then going to like resonate in the new world, right?
Yeah, well, the next question, there's a bit about evaluation criteria and the requirements of the Act, which brings us on to the National Procurement Policy Statement. So I think that's the wider literature that buyers, this contains the goals that the buyers are need to try and achieve. So we need to know what the buyers want to achieve so we can feed into that. So we put the cart before the horse a little bit here, but
Hmm.
the other question came in, and as Andrew said, these have all been clustered. This has been asked multiple times through different guises, which is why we've chosen to deal with it. So how can we ensure our tender responses are evidence-based? Great question. and meet the evaluation criteria under the Procurement Act. So I would start off by saying that evaluation criteria are specific to an opportunity rather than being contained within the Act. This would be contained within the tender literature. So the best advice that we can give here is just to check these against every opportunity that you're tendering for, and don't assume any consistency in these. But as we've just said, the new National Procurement Policy Statement does provide some consistency in what buyers are looking to achieve in procurement exercises, in addition to the goods and services that they're trying to get their hands on. So I'd suggest understanding these themes would be a good place to start. As we've said, they touch on the wider societal themes which will be considered within the most advantageous tender in this move away from the most economically advantageous tender. So National Procurement Policy Statement, really good place to start. Taking the first part of that question with regards to evidence-based, again, really good question, because it shows that we're thinking about how am I making this submission credible, believable. We know from previous webinars that buyers aren't allowed to infer any information about your company. You could be all over the news, you could win a Nobel Peace Prize. It actually doesn't, it's not that it doesn't mean anything, it won't be considered unless it's written within the tender, and that's to keep opportunities open, fair and transparent for everybody. So if you'd like information to be considered, it has to be in the bid. So evidence. There are many ways that we can do this. I am aware time is marching on, so I'll spin through them. But KPIs, key performance indicators, it's a mechanism used to directly measure success. So it could be about lead times. It could be about accuracy and invoicing, little things that how many times are you getting this right? So if you have previously delivered a public sector opportunity, you can say we hit 98% invoice accuracy, 100%, we never missed an appointment. So appointments missed could be a big thing. Conduct, complaints, this is how we measure success. So convey that information, use it as evidence within your bid writing and your submission. Quality within this, service outcomes, efficiency and cost management, regulatory compliance, staffing and workforce development. I've answered this through the lens of care because that was the context in which it was asked, but these are all transferable to any industry. Staffing and workplace development, regulatory compliance, health and safety, cost efficiency, all these things you can talk about through any lens. I do quickly want to talk about a little piece within staffing and workforce development. And I write about this quite regularly whenever I can, is that a good way to prove the efficiency and effectiveness of your workplace development is through internal promotions and staff retention. But really, this internal promotions, to my mind, if you're putting all your staff through training, development, CDP backed courses, we pay for it all. We have all this training that they have to do, onboarding, it's refreshed annually. We really champion our people, and then you have a senior vacancy come up and you fill it externally. It doesn't really breed confidence in your your training and development. Now, I'm not telling you how to recruit, but if we start talking about staffing and workforce development within our quality submissions, a good way to substantiate this point is through internal promotions. And I'll often try and write a case study. If I can, I work with different companies every week. So if I can, I'll try and get a case study of someone who maybe started on the tools, maybe someone who started as a trainee carer, or maybe a summer placement and is now head of a department or a senior manager. Okay, so we can talk about training opportunities until we're blue in the face. If these aren't translating into opportunities for your teams to progress, then what's the point? So again, credibility in the statements that we're making. A couple of other ways just to provide evidence is with a company net promoter score. That can be from both staff and client feedback. How do people perceive your business? What's it like to work for you? Client testimonials, again, pretty bulletproof, really good way to get your message across. And again, case studies, that could be a previous deliverable, or it could be someone within your company who has developed and upskilled. So lots of different ways to use the evidence. And again, something that I advise you put your time into getting across this, because it will really, really impact the standard of your bidding. And I'll hand back
Okay.
over to Andrew. That's it from myself.
Thank you. I was looking ahead, just again, we did have some slides, well, not slides, slide placeholders. I'll try to put a couple of points down relating to some of the other live questions that have come in. So a couple of questions around about existing contracts. So just for clarity, if a contract, say for example, like a framework that's got 2 or 3 years left to run on it. If that was started under the old Procurement Act, it continues to run under the old Procurement Act. It doesn't switch halfway through. The contract structure terms and the legislation and regulations that are applicable to it continue if that was launched beforehand. So we've had lots of variations on questions around that. So just a point to clarify. There was a question that said there was an authority started the procurement exercise under the old regime and then have used the new Procurement Act legislation for the award part of the process, which is just not what's supposed to happen. So I don't know the specifics. I feel nervous because it feels like a legally kind of, you're getting into some pretty dicey waters there. But just as a top line, fundamentally, that does not seem right to me, to be honest. So I would ask for some justification around why that seems appropriate, because the broad brushstroke is, if you started it under the old, it should be continued and finished under the old one. Okay. Um, so it's just to make you aware. There's a few questions have come in around about payment terms. So the idea of this 30-day payment term, i.e., that authorities have got to pay within 30 days, has been adjusted within the new requirements. It's been adjusted to make sure that below threshold opportunities or below threshold contracts are still captured with that. So it's going to be a 30-day invoice payment has got to be, because it's got to be done, so you've got to get paid within that. You are obligated again under the new regime to pass on that 30-day term to any subcontractors that you have working within that supply chain through to those opportunities. Okay, so that has to be reflected all the way through the supply chain. And the 30-day payment is triggered from the receipt rather than the validation. So it's a bit of a technical distinction, but again, it should mean that actually that 30 days sort of starts ticking right away, and it's only if things are in dispute, then you need to sort of reset it for a new 30 days. Okay. So if invoices are coming in, if they're valid, if there's no issues with them, the contracting authority should be paying for those within the 30 days, and you're expected to do likewise throughout your supply chain for subcontractors for those opportunities. Okay. Conscious of time, we just get one more. I wanted to just touch on really quickly, folks. Are we seeing issues or gains for SMEs? There's been lots of different variations. There were questions of that nature asked in registration, but are SMEs winning or losing essentially from the new legislation? The idea, based on what Alistair had brought up, the scene setting at the start, is very much it's supposed to be a win for SMEs. It's supposed to make it more accessible, not less accessible, in terms of how they're dividing up contracts, how it's being allotted, being more regionally specific, all that type of stuff. Thinking actively about how they can remove the barriers from SME participation. Proactive tenders direct. What we will be doing is we will be doing analysis over the coming months, maybe after 6 months or a year. One of the two sort of points, we will do an analysis of the data that we've got. We'll be saying, okay, what is the composition of the tender notices themselves? Who's winning them? Has that shifted more towards SMEs than we've seen previous? Are we seeing more VCSEs getting involved as well? Are we seeing a shift in terms of procurement types being used? Are we seeing SMEs, but it's a select SMEs that are hoovering up all the contracts, or is the participation and winning actually more distributed across an SME base? So we will be able to report back. It's too early to say broadly, but we will do analysis and report back on that in the coming months or a coming year. Okay. Just lastly, guys, just to signpost you to more support if you do want it. Tenders Direct website, Knowledge Hub, our webinars are there. You'll get a link to the recording for this webinar, and you can watch the previous ones which we've referenced before. If you want to have an individual conversation about this stuff or anything relating to bid support, there's our phone number. Feel free to give us a ring. There's our email. Do write in and we can have an individual conversation. We can get something in the diary to talk through with you. Do obviously go on the website and look at all our resources as well. And as Alistair's made reference to, Tenders Direct is still going to be the best option for aggregating and properly categorizing all of your public sector opportunities. So you can go on our website, you can get that sort of free trial and have one of our team talk you exactly through how it's going to show you what's there. So you're going to see all those opportunities, make sure you get full market coverage and you're pursuing the correct opportunities. Guys, there's been hundreds of questions, there's been hundreds of folk on. Really do mega appreciate it. We're running 1 minute over. Thank you very much for participation. Do ask us any specific questions you've got left, but I'll just say bye and thank you for sticking with us. It's been an absolute pleasure to be with you. I'll let Alistair say the goodbye and we'll toddle off.
Yeah, thanks all for your interest and attendance, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks so much, folks. Do reach out if you want to carry on the conversation by all means. It's been a real pleasure. Thanks again. Bye for now, everyone.